Hello, and welcome to our presentation for international industry analysis about the automotive industry. So, these are the topics we are going to approach today. First of all, demand analysis, especially the market segmentation. Then we'll go to the supply analysis, where we'll study the strategic groups and what are the trends that are shaping the automotive industry in the future. In the strategic issues, we're going to talk about the different strategic approaches and how they impact and how they are present in the automotive industry. Then we're going to talk about the national competitiveness, giving example of one country that's really powerful and influent in the industry. And to finish it off, we're going to talk about future challenges and strategic scenarios.
So now, starting with the segmentation, we decided to focus on economic, middle, and luxury class, such as the geography. Looking at the purchasing process, you can already see that the nature of buyers is very diverse, as different age groups ranging from teenagers to grandparents demanding for cars. Regarding B2B, the nature of buyers closely related to business, like car dealers or business owners, for example. According to their social status and financial opportunities, they are interested in a wide range of different car types, varying with features and services. These are the same for B2B and B2C, basically. Concerning the purchase amount of how much it is, mostly comes down to price and discount. They are generally similar from B2B and B2C, but it can be a bit different. Looking at B2C, you will see more individual discount and will be more or less only applied to specific cars or purchases, while in B2B, the discount can be due to quantity of cars purchased. The people who consume cars are often also the people buying the cars. Therefore, it is closely related to the nature of buyers, whom are consuming cars are more or less the same people within the category of who are purchasing them. This is valid for B2B and B2C. The most common motivations for B2C purchase and consumption of cars are changes in life situations, like getting a child, a new pet, or upgrading and replacing the car, or a change within the status. Concerning B2B, it's often correlated with the resale of cars. Looking at the setting of purchases, people often purchase after earning or receiving a large amount of money over time or within a short period of time, like promotional bonus, for example. Otherwise, maybe upgrading to a newly released car. This is similar for B2B or after car clearance of old models or purchasing for promotional campaigns or newly arriving models on the market. The place of purchase is very similar globally for B2C and B2B, with mostly dealership stores online or at the manufacturing site itself. The same for the payment, with most of the time offline payments like cash or credit cards, or credit cards, of course, can also be used as an alternative for online. So now I'm passing on to Alfonso for the geographical segmentation.
So, as Pascal said, we segmented the market in a geographical way. The purpose of this was to understand how different is the automotive industry in the different regions of the world. At first sight, what jumps right into our eyes are the growth rates that are expected to take a plunge in the next 3 years due to the recession caused by the COVID-19 pandemic that impacted greatly the industry, with the biggest car manufacturers seizing a lot of the production during 2020. In the main markets, North America, Europe, and Asia, the first two that I mentioned are expected to feel this impact in a greater extent. Asia and Oceania is actually the region with the biggest sustainable value, mainly due to China, that is the biggest market in the world and takes advantage of the Japanese and Korean engineering. Europe and North America have similar sustainable values. Actually, here, Europe has a slight edge over North America, despite a lower value in sales. These two regions' sustainability index is very promising due to the high quality of their prime manufacturers like General Motors, Ford, and Tesla in North America, and Volkswagen, BMW, and Daimler in Europe. Also, their mindset here is very innovative and preparing for the future. On the other hand, South America and Africa have weaker social demographic structures, which make them way less attractive and competitive in the industry. We also included a segmentation by type. So here we define regular, economic, regular, and luxury cars. They starting by the economic cars, typically classes A and B in the European classification, are getting more popular in the biggest markets, such as China, for example, due to the massive urbanization. It encourages people to get more eco-friendly and city-friendlier cars. This is also one of the main reasons why companies are using this segment to implement their new technologies, such as electrical and autonomous cars. The regular type of cars, mostly compact and medium-sized vehicles, is a segment with better sustainable valuation. Includes the vehicles that families buy, so it's not a surprise that it possesses the lowest risk valuation and the biggest valuation sales value of the three segments. In the luxury segment, a segment typically for high-end users, it has typically the highest margins. Here, companies compete in quality rather than in price, and the market is more concentrated and has more entry barriers compared with the other segments. One good example of a company operating mainly in the luxury segment is Tesla. That is becoming more and more relevant as the years pass, with their disruptive ideas that are set to change the industry in the long haul.
Thank you. Now we will take a look at the key success factors, starting with the economic cars. Especially important for the customers is the price, of course, and they connected the payment terms, as not everybody wants or is to be able to pay immediately and wants to spread the payment over years. As it's a lot about efficiency and low costs for economic cars as well, you can see that fuel consumption is an important factor, such as durability as well. It is similar for the competition factors with low operating costs or quantities, leading to key success factors of low operating costs, solid quality with a high durability and a wide dealer network, so it's accessible for everybody. Comparing this to the middle class, but the quality is getting more important, and maybe the use of the car as well by reaching for families or for more practical use. Additionally, people tend also to consider the design more than compared to economic cars. Regarding the competition factors, of course, the service is getting more important as more factors need to be included in the decision process, and people demand and expect a higher service. As cars are getting more expensive, a certain degree of product differentiation is also expected. Considering luxury cars, you'll see a greater focus on where you are buying, as the brand is signaling maybe status and show you are within a society or a certain position. Of course, in these type of cars, a high quality is not expected, it's just necessary, as these are also sometimes more fun or sports cars. Nice quality design is another purchasing factor for the customer, of course. Regarding the competition offering, exclusive and outstanding service like consultation, repairs, or 24/7 availability is a crucial factor that needs to be considered as well. In this type of segment, a product differentiation and innovation are key, and you always want to be better, faster, better engine, better design than your competition.
We use the PESTEL framework to analyze the key driver for demand in the automotive industry. From a political view, we have a lot of government subsidies all around the world, especially for electric vehicles that stimulate demand. We have also subsidies on the supply side that improve R&D and all the convenience of using EVs, which again makes it more attractive to buy them. We have taxes and penalty fees for polluting cars, and subsidies for alternative public transport, etc., as well as overall political stability more and more after Trump cost the automotive industry almost $700 billion with all his protectionist measures. On the economic side, of course, we had a decrease between 15 and 26% of car sales in all major markets. We have high potential growth in China and India, but the other BRICS countries with rather low potential. Then, of course, stimulating with new competition in the EV market, for example, Tesla and Rivian from the US or NIO from China. And then also in the classical traditional car industry from China with BYD, Geely coming up in India, Mahindra and Tata. And then we have kind of a lack still in EV infrastructure, which of course lacks the demand there. From social aspects, there is increasing acceptance of shared mobility as well as from electric vehicles, gets more and more convenient to use. And an overall growing population as well as urbanization, of course, makes electric and shared mobility more and more attractive overall. Technologically, there are great improvements in, for example, safety and range of electric vehicles as well as alternatives such as fuel cell, increase the demand in this part of the industry, and generally also the decreasing prices, as well as once the technologies of all the connected cars and autonomous driving are sophisticated, will lead to a great shift in demand. From environmental standpoint, of course, all countries around the world have like environmental goals and protection measures, such as the Kyoto targets and now the Paris Environmental Pact, which of course, from, as I mentioned earlier, from the political part, enforces like more and more the EV adoption. And then from a legal standpoint, many legal issues regarding autonomous driving and connecting vehicles, of course, safety and data protection are big points here. And then most other legal issues are derived from the political and technical measures I already mentioned.
So now we are going to talk about the supply analysis. We have 4 main segments, and we'll start by the segmentation and competitor analysis. For this, we have the strategic groups. Strategic groups, we have the strategies that different companies follow according to the different variables. In this first graph, we are considering geographic reach and product range. Regarding geographic reach, we have a greater concentration on the global market and multi-regional markets, while regarding the product range, we have higher-end companies such as Jaguar with a narrow range, while economic ones such as Toyota or Volkswagen opt for a more complete range. Regarding to the second graph, we have the number of current models and average price. We can see a clear relationship between these two variables. As we can see, like most luxury companies like Porsche have higher price and lower number of models, and more economic ones such as Volkswagen or Fiat, they have lower average price and a wider number of current models. However, we can see newcomers such as Chery, Geely, or Tata that have they offer low price cars with low number of current models.
So now in the value chain, we start in the left, which is the supply chain. This part is divided into 4 tiers of different suppliers, which are characterized by a period of inbound logistics between each tier. Tier 4, we have the supply of raw materials. In Tier 3, there's a processing of these raw materials and some simple auto parts manufacturing. In Tier 2, there's a development of more complex auto parts and IT systems. In the end, all of the supplies are delivered to Tier 1, where they're all integrated and then delivered to the original equipment manufacturers. All the suppliers between each tier are scattered all over the world between different companies, as we can see in the value chain. However, we can also say there's a tier 0.5, as there are already some subcontracted companies hired to assemble all of these parts for the brands. So now below the original equipment manufacturers is the aftermarket, where are the parts from the tier 3 to tier 1 are sold to retailers, distribution centers, repair stores, and even roadside assistance. At the top of the value chain, there are other stakeholders like banks, insurers, and telecoms who provide financial, mobility, and info services, which of course are much needed in this middle section of the value chain. After we have the final product, there's a period of outbound logistics, where the majority of the cars are sold to the car dealers, which in turn they sell them to the buyers, and then eventually they end up with the drivers. The original equipment manufacturers also sell to car rental companies for individuals and fleet providers who rent specifically to companies.
So for the digitalization in the automotive industry, we have 3 main topics that we want to cover here. The first one would be the digitalization in the car manufacturing process itself, where of course there's a trend to industrial Internet of Things, which is really important generally for all the data collection itself that later feeds all the machine learning and AI algorithms, for example, for predictive maintenance. A lot of new manufacturing plants also now use the industrial cloud computing, which makes it a lot easier to have machine intercommunication as well as robot-human collaboration. And another big point would be the shift to a digital twin, which allows like simulations of your whole manufacturing process, and you can really look where there's optimization potential. Next big thing is, of course, digital features in the vehicle itself and all the connected vehicle topics. So from the connected vehicles, there derive many new business models. For example, for insurance companies, when they can collect all the data of your car driving habits, a lot of fleet management, because you can basically have real-time data of all the cars out there. So there's high potential from that. And of course, it's also the baseline to feed all the development in autonomous driving and connected technologies such as LiDAR. And as a third big topic, of course, are mobility solutions. And here, there's the trend towards the multi-mobility platforms. So basically, in the end, from what we have now with like Uber, you can basically order a taxi or car sharing to just one platform where you can get everything from a bike to a scooter to a car or to a car with a driver.
Now let's look at how global trends affect supply. When we look at the effect of politics, we can see that political unrest definitely has an effect. For example, looking at the recent political unrest in the United States and Latin America and what that has meant for production facilities, distribution networks, and even material sources. Furthermore, the effects of trade wars are also definitely felt on supply, looking at the calming of the recent US and Chinese trade wars and what that's meant for stability in prices. The support and subsidization of green energy is also a political effect. This subsidization motivates the industry to investigate these effects more. Economic effects are mostly related to the general economic market, especially the effects of COVID-19 and the greater development of the world market, which expands supply channels but also increases competition. Societal effects serve primarily to generate a demand for greater variety in the market, including a demand for personalization, which expands the breadth of supply. Looking into the 2020s, there's also a strong focus on sustainability and corporate social responsibility, which will continue to affect development costs and push innovation. Looking at technological forces, many new and emerging technologies also drive supply, such as VUI, Bluetooth interfaces, and self-driving cars. These cause increases in R&D expenditure, but also expand supply. There's an innovation in manufacturing and data analytics, which can create efficiencies and create new competencies. Looking into the future, data analytics will become increasingly important as cars become more and more digitized and software becomes more important. Environmental factors include trends in the reduction of resource use and the need for sustainable production, but can also include the effects of natural disasters on the supply chain and distribution networks. The greatest effect of legislation is increased costs due to increasing legislation and regulation, especially looking towards safety, vehicle emissions, and transparency in reporting practices.
We will now focus on topic number 3, the strategic issues. We will start by presenting 2 different product market matrix. Then we will go on with the vertical integration, the internationalization, the diversification, and in the end, the acquisition and the strategic alliance. The first product market matrix we decided to present put in relation on the vertical axis the segmentation by different kinds of cars, and on the horizontal axis the geographical market where they are sold. The attractiveness of each continent is evaluated according to the result of the Sustainability Value Creation Index presented in the beginning of the presentation. Asia and Oceania is the most attractive continent, followed by North America and Europe. The less attractive are Africa and Latin America. The presence of each segment has been evaluated according to the market share in each continent. The market share has been computed with the data on the amount of cars sold. We have a strong presence when the market share is higher than 15%, medium presence when the market share is between 5 and 15%, low presence when it's lower than 5%, and no presence when the market share is lower than 1%. The distribution of the presence in each segment present only few differences worldwide. The most popular cars that show a strong presence in each continent are middle class and small SUV. The less popular cars are luxury cars that has a market share in each continent lower than 1%, the upper class, the sports car, and the open plan vans. We find the biggest difference in pickup, which have a strong presence in North and Latin America, low presence in Africa and Asia, and no presence in Europe. The big SUV instead has strong presence in North America, low presence in Asia, and medium in the other continent. The middle upper class has strong presence in North America, low presence in Africa, and medium in the other continent.
With this product's market strategy, we analyzed 14 well-known brands and their attractiveness and presence worldwide. For the most attractive markets, we have East Asia, Australia, and the overall Asia, mainly due to an enormous amount in sales and better rebound from COVID-19, where Toyota is a clear leader, followed by Volkswagen, Nissan, and Hyundai. When we take a look at North America and Europe, we have medium attractiveness, because we have similar markets that we've seen before. They have the same size, risk, sustainability. Again, Toyota stands out in North America as a major leader, followed by Ford and Nissan. In Europe, Volkswagen has the strongest presence, followed by Mercedes and BMW. Now, taking a look at Africa and South America, we have underdeveloped markets with very few penetration compared with other regions, coupled with worst industry development indicators, which makes them the least attractive market. As we can see, Toyota, Volkswagen, and Chevrolet as well have the strongest presence in these markets. So overall, Toyota and Volkswagen clearly dominate the market worldwide, followed by the other brands with medium presence and attractiveness.
So in the automotive industry, quasi-vertical integration is a huge part of the strategy. Quasi-vertical integration is entering into long-term contracts with suppliers or distributors in the value chain. Therefore, communication is key, especially by sharing knowledge of a supplier's intellectual property happening among suppliers and auto OEMs. In the past, the supply chain was used as a waterfall model, meaning an OEM would choose a tier 1 supplier, which decided a tier 2 supplier, and that trickles down. One example for that would be Ford. Nowadays, companies like Tesla are practicing the integration strategy of car makers, not being directly involved in the certain technologies they use in their cars. So OEMs are starting to directly contact the technology providers, which seems to be a more efficient strategy. Based on that, you can already see that the manufacturing process changed over time, especially electric cars already have led to a change, but will change car makers' process in the future even further. So as there will be longer periods during which both technologies will be applied. A potential solution for this challenge could be, on the one side, a high degree of in-house competency and vertical integration, from innovation to manufacturing, and on the other side, high levels of cooperation with suppliers and low vertical integration. In further changes we can expect in the manufacturing process?
Regarding the continuations of changes in manufacturing, we have the traditional players having higher transaction costs when compared to new automakers due to their hierarchical structure, as we can see in the left side of this picture. Regarding new competitors, they have a more flexible supply chain as they contact directly with all the suppliers in a direct two-way information flow way. Versus the traditional ones, which have a dependency system, which causes higher transaction and management costs. As an example of the traditional one, we have Ford, which in 1920 had a tightly vertical integrated chain in which they own every part of this supply chain. This was very effective for one model, but as trends evolved, this structure became obsolete. For the new one, we have the Tesla case. For instance, Panasonic has funded the plant for Tesla, and Panasonic supplies Tesla's batteries. And this is an example of this new hub and spoke system, which is based on sharing resources and knowledge. Also, it's interesting to notice the changes in the cost of the cars. The microprocessors and chips are now commodities such as steel and aluminium. Actually, electronics are responsible for 40% of a car's total cost, according to a study made by Deloitte, and this number is expected to go up to 45% by 2030.
When talking about internationalization, we can first talk about international trade. As benefits and goals, we have better market access, offering more options to consumers, and at the same time decreasing costs and expanding the reach of the company. As the world's largest exporters and importers, we have first, as biggest exporter, Germany. This is due to the fact that they have a great know-how in the area and at the same time great manufacturing power. At the same time, as importers of automobile products, we have the EU and the United States, followed by China, Canada, and the UK. It's also important to see that together, EU and US account for 386% more than China, Canada, and the UK together. When talking about internationalization, we also talk about international investments. As benefits and goals, have better market access, decreasing costs, contributing to another country's economy, using other countries' know-how, expanding the company, and producing more for a smaller cost. As an example, we can see here the world's largest car manufacturers, and here we can see that most of them manufacturers in more than 10 or 15 countries. It is also important to see that all of them have a growing presence in China, so that they are not only there now, but they have a growing presence in the region. This is due to the fact that they can there produce more for a smaller cost and at the same time profit from the country's know-how.
Now, let's talk about strategic alliances. In this kind of approach, where two or more companies set a partnership with a common goal in mind, being for developing new technologies or reducing the manufacturing costs, this takes into account the sharing as a corporate strategy because can create economies of scale, improve the efficiency, or reduce the learning curve. In these days, we can see that driving companies are to be the first ones to achieve new levels with better connections, self-driving, environmental technologies. We can talk about two different cases like Uber and Toyota, or even NVIDIA with different companies to develop new processes. Now you can perceive that it's not only the automotive manufacturers, but it's also software and hardware companies also join these alliances
to grow into new markets with their state-of-art technology. It's also notable to add the fact that strategic alliances can also be alternative to mergers and acquisitions. For example, Renault was also looking to likely to merge with Fiat until external forces made the deal untenable due to antitrust laws. Regarding the mergers and acquisitions, we have giant companies in the market who need to develop and follow the trends that are shaping the automotive future. These companies with high power of acquisition prefer to buy out small and medium companies to absorb their new processes and technologies, make the development faster and cheaper. Over the years, we can see that had an increase in the number that mergers and acquisitions happens in the automotive sector, where you can mention a recent one between FCA and PCA in a deal valued around 38 billions of euros. This will make the new company the fourth biggest company in the market, with more than 10 brands in its portfolio.
In the following chapter, I will cover the national competitiveness and use Germany as an example to apply the national diamond model. Starting with the country attractiveness, we assessed 4 countries, which was China, Germany, the US, and Japan, using the sustainable value. Here, of course, markets like China benefited from the market size and growth, whereas, for example, countries such as Germany have a better assessment in risk and sustainability. Nevertheless, overall, China had here the highest sustainable value. Now we want to look at the national diamond model for Germany, though, and understand why we're able to create such a competitive industry. Coming to the demand factors, simply the size of the population is a great talent pool. Germany is rather rich now, has great financial power to support innovations through the R&D. Many human resources from related industries that bring in the engineering capabilities. The example here would be BMW, that actually developed from an aircraft company. And the free higher education system with very popular engineering studies allow the high quality human resources that are necessary. And there's strong labor unions such as IG Metall and Verdi that ensure the attractiveness of working in the industry. Additional point here is a large foreign labor pool through immigrants, etc. Coming to the demand conditions, again, the big population is of course a high potential customer base. This population has a high purchasing power and also a high willingness to pay through these German brands and a quite established, proud industry. Willingness to pay increases inside Germany, but also through the reputation internationally. Last point is that the EU common market, of course, allowed international demand to grow a lot faster. Coming to the strategy, structure, and rivalry. From the history, there was a big competition between the German car manufacturers. This competition was always based on quality. For example, when one German car manufacturer, Opel, changed their strategy towards a low cost, they failed. The strategy, is based on the strong worldwide reputation, and also the concentration in geographical areas only increased the collaboration and knowledge transfer. Strong industry associations such as the Verband Deutscher Automobilhersteller also enhances the collaboration between OEMs and sets important industry standards. And the few industry players, like the big German car brands that were successful here, create kind of an oligopolistic market, which allows them to have high pressure, high power over the suppliers and leading to very close relationships here. Related and supporting industries, I will come to on the next slide a little bit more. But pretty much the whole supply chain is present in Germany with a very close relationship between OEMs and their suppliers, as we mentioned earlier, with a quasi-integration. And it's also quite important for the OEMs to have these German suppliers to keep this label of made in Germany. Going to the 2 additional factors, which ones would be chance. As we all know, there was a war in Germany, which is terrible. But of course, it's always a point where governments put a lot of money into the industry, and in this case, increase car production by a huge amounts. They built the Autobahn, and all of that basically helped the automotive industry. And also the geographic location in the middle of the EU and with access to the sea always is good for international trade. The government plays a role in the sense of funding the R&D and the financial incentives to end customers that we mentioned earlier, as well as the good worldwide trade relations just to make global markets available. Here, the cluster sectors refer back to the supporting and related industries I just mentioned in the National Diamond Model. Examples for related industries, all based on this engineering excellence in Germany, would be the aerospace industry with MTU, for example, other brands like MAN and Claas in the buses and truck, as well as agricultural industry. And you could also mention Siemens Mobility for the train production, for example, here. For the supporting industries, like throughout the value chain, big international players are all from Germany, starting with raw materials like metal processing, all the way to tier one suppliers, for example, here the tires as well as the production equipment. For the regional cluster analysis, we used Stuttgart and the surrounding Baden-Württemberg area as an example, and we'll analyze why the automotive industry got so sophisticated here. First point would be education. Karlsruhe and Stuttgart have two of the best universities for engineering in Germany, and this high education, of course, provides the necessary skilled labor. For research and development, all major research institutes in Karlsruhe, Stuttgart, and Freiburg, and this government-backed R&D provides the necessary innovation for the automotive industry here. Then, of course, there is a historic advantage in this area. Karl Benz studied engineering in Karlsruhe, he built his first car in Mannheim, and established the Mercedes-Benz factory in Stuttgart. This brings me to the next point. Of course, all of this wouldn't be there without major OEM presence, which is here mainly Mercedes and AMG, as well as Porsche. And with these OEMs being there, all major suppliers followed. So great value chain proximity, improving all the collaboration between them, as well as in R&D. And this is what makes it such a competitive regional cluster. So in the last chapter, we will cover key challenges for the future and identify some strategic scenarios. Challenges for the future that are specific to the automotive industry can be summarized as case. So what does it mean that cars will become case? It means that they become connected, autonomous, shared, and the shift to electric mobility. As we talked about all of these topics throughout the presentation already, for example, in the digitalization part, I don't want to repeat myself on these. And I also want to stress out that these are challenges that are industry specific. Of course, there are other challenges such as the recent COVID pandemic you could add. For the strategic scenarios, we used on the y-axis as an internal factor the uncertainty whether the development of autonomous driving software will ever be good enough to be actually implemented. And then on the x-axis as an external factor, the social acceptance and trust in shared mobility. In the first quadrant, we basically have the status quo, where the main customers are individuals that buy private cars for themselves. They're usually individualized, customized. And if this stays in this like this for the future, of course, there will be big losses for all the companies that are heavily invested in the autonomous driving software as well as in shared mobility. As soon as the acceptance and demand for shared cars increases, we have a shift in the customer for OEMs. So now the main focus is not the individual that buys a car anymore, but the fleet providers who buy the cars. And that usually comes along with standardization, since these fleet providers buy a large amount of cars, but it's usually the same color, same interior, etc. In the third quadrant, we already have this case mobility. Now, why is it already the full case, even though on the two axes we only have the shared and the autonomous? It's because the connected is basically a prerequisite to the autonomous, so it usually implies it. and which is quite interesting from an operational point. For all the shared mobility providers, it makes a lot of sense to use electric cars because of the maintenance costs are a lot lower in the long term, and also from charging versus getting new fuel, it makes more sense from an operational point. And as a last quadrant, will be basically just this private demand shift to the autonomous vehicles, which would probably create a lot slower transition there. And that was the last point of our presentation. Thank you for listening to us. And if you have any questions, feel free.